Welcome back to AllGen Academy. So today we want to discuss a subject that has been the center of some controversy over the last few years, and that's education and college costs. We say this because obviously college costs have risen historically, and not that education is a bad thing. You know, we were raised in that environment where it says, you know, get a good degree, get a good education so you can do well in life, which is great. However, there's some negatives associated with that, especially when you have to finance your education. Okay, we know that the debt and liability associated with getting an education is one of the biggest liabilities in our country right now.
That's right.
So we're going to throw out a controversial question, and this is coming from people who have college educations. Okay, but is college worth it, Jason? Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So right now, the average student loan in America is $46,459. Okay, which is more than a lot of times you'll make in the first year.
That's right.
When you graduate college. So it depends. The question, is it worth it? It depends. You know, I don't think college is for everyone. You know, I think there's people who would do really well with a technical degree, and they can, and maybe what they want to go into, they can excel and do well with a technical degree. Maybe they don't need a degree at all. Depends on, you know, what your dream is, what your, you know, goals and desires are.
Actually, there's stories of some very successful people that dropped out of college
yeah,
and became multimillionaires. So, you know, but our goal here is not to say college is good or bad. You know, as with investments, it all depends on your particular makeup, your goals, your strategies, your aspirations. Okay, but understand the ramifications, the pros and cons of pursuing a college degree. As you just mentioned, the loans are ridiculously high. That's a negative. That's a con. Okay, the cost of college is not cheap.
No, right now it's close to $90,000 for a 4-year in-state school if you're paying for room and board. Public in-state school if you're paying for room and board right now. So that's an investment, right? And you want a return on that investment.
Right.
But you want to be wise about how to either save for that or how to make sure you get through school without student loans.
Right. Now, historically, you know, studies show that the more educated you are, technically, the better income you should make. And I say should because I know some people with high degrees who are making a lot of money. But if you see the chart here, you can see that as you get more advanced degrees and attain higher levels of education, technically, on average, your income typically goes up.
That's right. So as you can see here, if we look here, this is non-high school degree, and this is household income. So this could be a married couple, or this could be a single person. But then you have high school right here. You have some to college. But as you can see here, the more degrees you have, typically, you know, the higher income you make. At the same time, the longer the degree is, a master's, you know, a doctorate, things like that, cost a lot more.
That's right.
Than just a 4-year college.
That's right. So, as it costs a lot more, and we saw what a 4-year public education costs, you know, how do we pay for this, okay? And here's, as financial advisors, our number one goal is graduate without debt.
Yes.
Okay, as I mentioned earlier, college education loans, student loans are one of the highest liabilities that we have as a country.
Yeah, I mean, we've had people in our office who had to take jobs they didn't want to take just to be able to pay for the student loan. And they had to leave good jobs that they really loved doing, but it just didn't make enough to be able to make the student loan payments. We've had, you know, pregnant moms scared and with husbands sitting together crying because, you know, they have $150,000 in student loans, but they're only making $50,000 a year with that much student loan, you know, and it's hard to get by like that.
That's exactly right. And again, we're not saying college is a bad thing, okay, but the goal is to see if you can start early enough, okay, whether it's for you or for your child, okay, to start thinking about how to be able to graduate with a degree without having the debt associated with it.
That's right.
So here's some of the ways. There's scholarships, there's grants, you can save, you can work, and we're going to go a little bit more to depth on how to do this, but here's some types of saving vehicles. You can see there's a 529 plan, UGMA, UTMA, ESA Coverdell, brokerage, education savings bonds, and prepaid. So let's go into these in a little further depth.
Sure,
Jason.
absolutely.
So there's a prepaid 529, prepaid college fund, if you will. And this is a plan where a lot of states offer these, and the typical drive behind this is that you prepay. So you lock in the cost of college today for when your child goes to school in the future. Okay? So if tuition costs are X amount today, you're buying credits at this rate, which will then apply for when your kid goes to school, no matter what the credit costs are at that point.
Yep. Yeah, and there was a time, and this is going to vary over time, but there was a time where college costs really increased a lot every year. The cost of inflation for college used to be very high, so to be able to lock it in early, it was a pretty good rate of return.
Right.
But more recently, the inflation on college hasn't been as high. So, typically we recommend these type of plans to consider if you're closer to college and you don't have as much time for that account to grow.
Right, because these are not market driven.
Yeah.
Okay, it's you're being guaranteed X amount. Now, there's pros and cons and there's guarantees in the market and in this as well.
Right.
Okay, so the pro is peace of mind that you know that whatever you put in and the contract says you'll be guaranteed, you got it.
Right.
Okay, the con is there's things that happen in life that don't fall within the parameters of what that contract covers.
That's right.
So if you go out of state, well, most of these plans are driven by in-state tuition costs, so your out-state will be more. So you can still apply it, okay, which will be great, but there'll be that guarantee's gone.
Expensive, yeah.
As far as that's concerned.
And it's not offered in every state, so you have to be aware of that. And if your child doesn't end up going to college, then there's the potential that you only get the money that you put in back out.
Right.
So that could be a con as well.
But it exists. They're really upping the game here because they see the controversy with college costs. So a lot of states are really making these better plans. And again, we're not saying it's good or bad. It really depends on your situation, your risk tolerance, and your time horizon. Okay, so that's the prepaid 529. Then there's a 529 savings. Okay, and these are not to be confused. There's a 529 prepaid, 529 savings. These are more driven, market driven.
That's right.
Not the guarantees, right, Jason?
That's correct. Yeah. So this one you would typically invest in this inside this account, and this could potentially grow at certain market rates that over time are usually higher than the cost of inflation for college. Not guaranteed though, and it still covers, just like the prepaid, it covers all your tuition and your expenses, but outside of just college, you can also pay for some of your K through 12 educational expenses too, which is nice with the 529. So you're gonna say something?
No, go ahead.
Yep, no. So the big difference between this and what we're going to cover next is there's no annual contribution limit. So you can put a ton of money into these to be able to grow over a long period of time.
I mean, some plans do have maximums per state.
Yeah.
Okay, so it might be $250,000 or things of that nature. But
it's
it's not your
amount.
tip. It's very high amount that some people even use for estate planning. But yeah,
that's right.
It's very high amounts.
And no income restrictions, so it doesn't matter how much money you can make that you can put into it. And depending on which state you're in, it may qualify for some state income tax credits as well.
That's exactly right. So prepaid, you have some guarantees, pros and cons of that. This one, not the guarantees, but there's pros and cons, flexibility, can apply to different situations.
Yeah.
So that's a big difference between the two.
Yeah, and I think the big benefit of the 529, the savings versus the prepaid, is that, if something happens and your child doesn't go to college and you bought that, when the child was in its first year and it's been growing for 18 years, you can pull that money out with some of the growth on it. Now, the non-qualified withdrawals that are not used for educational purposes do have some tax penalties, but at least you get that growth, or the potential for that to grow over time.
That's exactly right. So you've got the prepaid 529, you've got the 529 savings. There's another one called I think it's the Coverdell, the education, the ESA. It's not as high as far as limits as what you can put in. But Jason, explain to us how that works.
Yeah, so this one is kind of similar to 529 from the standpoint of what it's used for, pretty much a broad amount of college, cost, but at the same time you can use for primary and secondary school as well. The other difference with this one and the 529 is that you can invest in a lot of different investment options, where you think of kind of like the 529 almost like a 401k, and then they have limited investment options.
Right.
An ESA has a wide array. It's kind of more like a Roth IRA from the standpoint. It has a lot of different investment options that you can invest in. So you could potentially earn more money with that account. However, the disadvantages are, the main ones is that you can only contribute $2,000 a year.
Right.
And the other main one is there's income restrictions. So, as of this recording, if you're married and you make over $220,000, you're not eligible. Or if you're single making over $110,000, you're not eligible. So a lot of these, too, the 529s and the ESAs, you could transfer to another beneficiary, like another sibling, which is a nice benefit.
Yeah, especially with the prepaid, they tell you the last thing you want to do is cash it out because you just get your money back. That was a waste of however many years.
Right.
But if you can, older sibling doesn't go to school, so you switch the beneficiary to the younger sibling, they go to school, you still get all the bang for your buck on that regard.
That's right.
So keep that in mind when thinking about these. But then these are all plans that take time, okay? But as the child gets older or you decide to go back to school as you're an adult, okay, you may say, wait, I don't have that much time, or it's too late for me to save for college. What do I do in that situation, Jason?
Yeah, so if it's too late to save, here's some different options that you could think about. Many employers will pay for your schooling or portions of your schooling. I worked in college, and actually my employer in college paid for 9 credit hours every semester.
Nice.
So that was a nice benefit. And if I didn't have any extra money, and if I was just going to work through college, technically, I could have that just do 9 credits every semester and then have that company pay for it. So also, you can work through college.
Which you said you did, right?
So not only do you have potentially the company paying for it, but you're also earning income, which you could use to pay for the tuition and living expenses and things like that. And a lot of people aren't aware of this fact, but on average, kids who work or students who work part-time going through college actually earn a higher GPA than those that don't work at all.
Right.
It teaches you a lot of things, time management skills, life skills, things like that, and you tend to appreciate something more when you pay for it yourself.
That's right.
But leading up into college, or even when you're in the college years, you could also really search hard for scholarships. I mean, if you applied for a scholarship every day your senior year of high school, and it was just that's your thing for the whole year, even though you don't have any money saved for college, you just kept applying for scholarships. There's a lot of times and examples where people had enough scholarships to pay for their whole college, but there's a lot of intentionality behind that and a lot of work, and that's kind of your part-time job.
That's exactly
is applying for those grants and scholarships.
I have a friend who wanted to go to medical school, didn't have the money, and she literally worked part-time researching scholarships and got her medical school practically paid for by all these scholarships she did. So
they're out there. You just have to search hard for them and apply for them. So the whole point of this is we want you to try to avoid student loans at all costs, because we've just seen people carry these student loans into their 50s and later years and 60s, and they almost like they can never pay them off, and it just lingers there, and you're always paying that interest. And a lot of times people don't even pay the interest on these student loans, and they start growing.
Right.
Even when you're out of school.
Right.
And the interest is compounding, working
it's
against
deferred.
you.
Well, the payment's deferred, but the interest is not deferred necessarily.
That's right.
And it's tough because you hear these programs. Oh well, I'm just going to work in a non-profit public sector service job because then they're going to forgive all my loans. We can have a whole discussion about that. That theoretically sounds great. Right now, less than 1% of all student loans are being forgiven via that program. So I'm not saying that's going to be the case moving forward, but it's a tough one. So you really have to be intentional about not getting disqualified for that, forgiveness program, etc. So at the end of the day, there's all these different programs. Not that one makes more sense than another. It depends, as always, what your financial plan, goals, time horizon, how much you can put away. But it's important that you understand the different makeup of these vehicles, see which one makes more sense for you, and at the end of the day, strive to have no student debt when you or your child graduates, because that will set them up at a higher success rate for financial freedom. So thanks for listening. Talk to you soon.